My uncle left his entire fortune to whoever could solve his riddle, so our family turned feral. Uncle Garrett was the black sheep, a self-made tech titan who'd built a fortune in cryptocurrency long before it had a name. While we struggled with dead-end jobs and mounting debt, he lived in a sprawling estate with 7 bedrooms, a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes, and a garage full of cars that cost more than my annual salary. When he died suddenly at 52 from a heart attack, we all assumed his wealth would go to some obscure charity, a final spiteful jab at the family that had shunned him for decades. Instead, the lawyer summoned us all to his office and read the strangest will any of us had ever heard. To my greedy relatives who only called when they needed money or wanted to complain about their pathetic lives, I'm giving you one chance to prove your worth beyond the sum of your failures. Solve my riddle, claim everything I've built, fail, and it all burns in a magnificent bonfire while you watch from the street. The riddle was printed on thick, embossed paper and sealed in individual envelopes, one for each of us, where shadows dance but cast no light, where silence screams throughout the night, where memory lives but time stands still. Find the key to my last will. At first, we actually worked together like a real family. Aunt Patricia suggested the old darkroom where Garrett spent hours developing photos. Cousin Dylan thought it meant his study, where he'd sit in total darkness typing for hours. Mom insisted it was the basement wine cellar, filled with bottles worth thousands each. My brother Finn believed it referred to the attic, where dust-covered furniture waited under white sheets. For 3 weeks, we tore through every corner of the mansion like rabid animals, moving furniture untouched in years, checking behind priceless paintings for hidden safes, ripping up Persian rugs, prying up floorboards until our fingers bled. We searched crawl spaces, pried open books in the library, even drained the pool to check for underwater hiding spots. Nothing, not a single clue. That's when the cracks began to show, like rubber bands stretched too far. Patricia hired a private investigator charging $800 a day. Dylan bribed the longtime housekeeper with a $1,000 tip for secrets about Garrett's habits. Mom started arriving at dawn, claiming she needed quiet to think clearly. Finn installed hidden cameras throughout the house, watching us like we were criminals. Then came the betrayal. Patricia found something she wasn't supposed to. While searching Garrett's master bedroom for the 100th time, she discovered a loose floorboard beneath his massive antique bed. Beneath it lay a metal lockbox containing old photographs, and a second riddle in Garrett's unmistakable handwriting. But instead of calling the rest of us, she slipped it into her designer purse and pretended nothing had happened. Finn's surveillance caught it all. Perfect HD footage. The next morning, he confronted her in front of the whole family gathered in the kitchen. She denied stealing anything until he played the video. We watched her face shift from confidence to guilt to panic in 30 seconds flat. "Give it back," Mom demanded, her voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "I found it fair and square," Patricia shot back. "Possession is 9/10 of the law." That's when Dylan snapped. He lunged at her, ripped open her purse, and dumped everything onto the marble floor. The box crashed open with a sound like breaking bones, scattering photos and papers everywhere. There were ancient Polaroids of places I didn't recognize. Our childhood lake house, long since abandoned after Grandpa died. Garrett's first dingy apartment above the pizza shop where he taught himself programming. The sketchy carnival where he'd worked summers, operating the tilt-a-whirl for drunk teenagers and saving every penny for college. But one photo made Patricia gasp so loudly we all turned to stare. It showed the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the place Grandpa used to take us to play elaborate games of hide-and-seek. "He wouldn't," she whispered, barely audible. "Wouldn't what?" Finn demanded, snatching the photo from her shaking hands. Patricia looked like she'd seen a ghost. Grandpa used to tell us horror stories there during thunderstorms. Garrett was terrified after what happened. He swore on our mother's grave he'd never set foot inside again. Dylan picked up the tarnished key, turning it over in his calloused hands. "This isn't for any safe deposit box I've ever seen. Look at these wear marks. This key's been used recently. Often." The warehouse was exactly 43 minutes outside town according to GPS. 15 acres of worthless swampland our family had owned for generations. We piled into Finn's SUV like kids again, tension so thick I could barely breathe. No one spoke except to give directions. I noticed Mom constantly checking her phone, probably texting her latest boyfriend Randy about the inheritance and how it might affect their upcoming wedding. When we arrived, the warehouse looked just as I remembered. Rusted metal siding, rusted orange-brown from decades of weather, broken windows never repaired, that familiar stench of decay and stagnant water clinging to everything within a quarter-mile radius. The only difference? A heavy-duty padlock on the front door. Expensive, recently installed. Dylan's key fit perfectly. With a satisfying click, the lock disengaged. Inside, our flashlights revealed something impossible. The warehouse had been completely renovated. Concrete floors, spotless and painted white. walls insulated and covered in fresh drywall. Professional lighting hung from exposed beams, and in the center of the cavernous space sat an antique wooden table with 5 chairs arranged in a perfect circle. On each chair, a manila envelope with our names written in Garrett's careful hand. "This is insane," Finn muttered, but he was already walking toward his chair like he was hypnotized. Mine contained another riddle, but this one felt personal, chilling. "Before you stands your final test. One truth will put your greed to rest. Choose wisely what you value most, or join me as a warning ghost." Beneath it, a typed confession made my stomach drop and my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped the paper. When we were kids, about 15 years ago, Garrett had been watching us play hide-and-seek in this very warehouse when a section of rotted floor collapsed without warning. 8-year-old Dylan fell through, landing hard on a pile of rusted machinery. His leg shattered so badly that jagged bone pierced through the skin, blood pooling around him alarmingly fast. The rest of us panicked and ran screaming for adults. But Garrett, then 13, already taller than most teens, stayed behind. He climbed down into the dark basement, used his favorite shirt as a tourniquet, applied pressure, and kept talking calmly to Dylan to keep him conscious until paramedics arrived 20 minutes later. According to the ER doctor, Dylan would have bled to death without immediate help. But that's not the story our family told for the past 15 years. Patricia, then 14, already consumed by jealousy and manipulation, had convinced our parents and everyone else that Garrett had caused the accident. She claimed he'd dared Dylan to jump across the weak floor, egging him on, calling him a coward. She'd been furious that summer because Garrett always got the attention. Smart, funny, charming in a way that drew everyone in. Patricia was average at everything: grades, looks, personality, and couldn't stand being overshadowed. So she lied. She crafted a detailed story, coached the younger kids on what to say, and made sure everyone believed her. Our parents accepted it because Garrett already had a reputation as the family troublemaker. Not because he was bad, but because he questioned authority and refused to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. For the next 15 years, Garrett was treated like a criminal for saving Dylan's life. I looked around the table at my family, watching their faces as they read their own versions of the truth. Dylan stared at his envelope with growing horror, mouth hanging open as memories surged back. Mom went pale, gripping her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Finn looked confused, overwhelmed, too young to remember clearly, but old enough to absorb the narrative that Garrett was dangerous. Patricia cried silently, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. "I was just a kid," she sobbed. "I didn't understand what it would mean. I didn't know it would follow him for the rest of his life." "You destroyed his relationship with our parents," Dylan said quietly, his voice raw with pain. "He tried to tell them the truth, begged them to listen. They'd already decided he was lying. They chose you over him." That's when I noticed the cameras, 4 professional-grade security units mounted in each corner of the warehouse, their small red recording lights blinking steadily in the shadows. We'd been filmed since the moment we walked through the door. A voice echoed from hidden speakers, Garrett's voice, but the recording was recent, likely made just days before his death. If you're hearing this, you've solved my riddle and learned the truth about what really happened here 15 years ago. Congratulations, you've finally chosen to face reality. You've also just confessed your crimes on camera in front of multiple witnesses. Patricia looked up at the nearest camera, tears streaking through her ruined makeup. "Garrett, please. I'm sorry. I was young, stupid, jealous. But I never meant—" "Not the rest of you," the recording continued, cold fury in his tone. "You stole 15 years of family relationships from me with your lie. You cost me my parents' trust, my siblings' love, any chance at a normal bond with the people who should have mattered most. That betrayal is worth exactly $15 million. Multiple screens lit up on the walls, legal documents in Garrett's distinctive filing system. Patricia's name appeared as the sole beneficiary of his primary estate, but with conditions. The money comes with strings attached. Dear cousin, you have exactly 1 year to publicly confess your lie to every person you told it to. Starting with our parents' graves, you'll establish a foundation for falsely accused children. You'll spend the rest of your life undoing the damage you caused. Fail to meet any condition, and the money goes to charity. Your confession video gets uploaded to every social media platform on Earth." Finn leapt up so violently his chair toppled. "This is insane! This is her fault! Why should we be punished?" "Because you never questioned it," the recording replied, as if Garrett had anticipated this exact reaction. 17 years have passed. None of you ever asked Dylan what he actually remembered. You just accepted that your brother was a monster, because it was easier than admitting you might have been wrong. Dylan's envelope held different documents entirely, a trust fund worth $2 million, and a letter that made him break down, sobbing. "Dylan," Garrett's voice softened, filled with warmth I remembered from childhood. "I'm sorry I never had the courage to tell you the truth while I was alive. You deserve to know someone fought for you that day. You deserve to know you were worth saving. I never regretted staying behind to help you. I hope this money can buy you some of the therapy our family should have given you years ago." Mom's envelope was nearly empty. Just one devastating sentence on expensive letterhead. "A mother who doesn't defend all her children." equally doesn't deserve wealth or forgiveness. Finn's contained a check for $50,000 and a note that was both generous and brutal. You were 5 when this happened. You're not responsible for the lie, but you're 22 now, old enough to think for yourself, not blindly accept family mythology. This money is for college. Learn to question everything, especially stories that make one person a hero and another a villain. Mine held the biggest shock of all. My dear niece, Garrett's voice continued, you never fully believed Patricia's lie, did you? Not completely. He was absolutely right, and the accuracy of his observation made my skin crawl. I'd been 7 that day, old enough to remember Garrett's bloody shirt and how gentle he'd been with Dylan while we waited for the ambulance. Old enough to notice the inconsistencies in Patricia's story when she told it to the adults. I'd watched you struggle with that secret for years during family gatherings. I saw how it ate at you, especially during holiday dinners when someone inevitably brought up the warehouse and painted me as the villain. You tried to tell your mother the truth once, at 12, but she shushed you, told you not to contradict Patricia. My envelope contained legal documents making me executor of a separate trust fund, $3 million designated specifically for truth-tellers, who find their courage too late, but still choose to do the right thing. The cameras recording this conversation will automatically upload the footage to every family member's social media accounts in exactly 1 hour, tagged with your real names, employers. Unless someone takes full responsibility for what really happened that day, your confessions become public knowledge. Patricia looked around the table, eyes wild with panic. I'll tell everyone. I'll post on Facebook. I'll call everyone. I'll fix this somehow. 16 years too late, Dylan said quietly, but there was something like forgiveness in his voice. Then Mom surprised us all. She stood slowly, walked to the center of the room, and positioned herself directly in front of the largest camera. Her voice broke, but she spoke with a dignity I'd never seen before. My name is Rebecca Thorne. I failed my son in the worst possible way. When Patricia told us Garrett caused Dylan's accident, I should have investigated. I should have asked questions. I should have listened to his side with an open mind. Instead, I chose the easy story. I chose to believe one son was a hero, the other a dangerous troublemaker. I chose convenience over truth, and Garrett paid the price for my failure as a mother for the rest of his short life. The recording stopped abruptly. The camera shut off with audible clicks. For several long minutes, the warehouse was silent, except for Patricia's muffled sobs and the distant hum of traffic. Then Finn laughed, bitter, hollow, the kind that comes when someone realizes their entire life was built on lies. So what happens now? He asked, voice cracking. Do we just pretend this never happened and go back to our miserable lives? No, Dylan said firmly, standing with more strength than I'd seen in years. Now we do what Garrett actually wanted us to do. We tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We stop protecting people who don't deserve it. We start being the family he deserved. 6 months later, Patricia used her inheritance to launch the Garrett Thorne Foundation for wrongly accused children, providing legal aid and counseling for kids wrongly blamed. Her first major case involved a teenager expelled based on false accusations from a jealous classmate. She saw herself in both accuser and accused, and fought harder for justice than anyone expected. Dylan donated his entire trust fund to expand the foundation's reach. Money can't buy back lost time with Garrett, he said, but it might prevent other families from making the same mistakes. He began therapy and started speaking publicly about childhood trauma and scapegoating. Mom used her savings to commission a memorial garden in Garrett's honor at the hospital where Dylan had been treated. She spent her retirement volunteering there, reading to children in the ER, advocating for better communication between staff and families during crises. Finn used his college money to study criminal justice and psychology. I want to help others who've been falsely accused, he said. He wrote his senior thesis on the psychology of family scapegoating and how small lies can destroy relationships for generations. I kept my inheritance, but not for myself. Garrett's final document was clear. The money came with responsibility. Spend your life telling true stories about families who've learned to do better. Expose the toxic dynamics that nearly destroyed ours. That's why I'm sharing this now, publicly, honestly. But the story doesn't end there. Last week, exactly 1 year after Garrett's death, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Seattle I'd never heard of. Another uncle I'd never known existed. Garrett's half-brother from our grandfather's first marriage had died, and left specific instructions. His will would only be read if I was present as a witness. The lawyer, a stern woman in her 60 seconds, handed me a sealed envelope. My name written in handwriting eerily similar to Garrett's. Inside, a photograph of Garrett and a mysterious man standing together, smiling in front of a building I didn't recognize. On the back, in careful script, some family secrets run deeper than others. The real riddle wasn't about money. It was about whether your generation would choose truth over comfort when it truly mattered. Below that, an address in Montana and an old-fashioned brass key, worn smooth from decades of use. The lawyer explained, this uncle, Thomas, had watched our family drama unfold for years. He knew about Patricia's lie, about our parents' failure to investigate, about Garrett's isolation and pain. He'd left me an inheritance, but only if I agreed to continue what Garrett had started. Thomas believed some family traditions are worth breaking, the lawyer said. Others are worth starting. I drove to Montana the next morning, camping gear loaded, supplies for a week. The address led me to a remote property outside Bozeman, surrounded by endless mountains. The main house was a sprawling log cabin, built in the 1920s with additions added over decades. The brass key opened the front door easily. Inside, it felt like stepping into a museum of a family history I'd never known. Walls covered with photographs, spanning nearly a century, relatives I'd never met, gatherings predating my birth, dozens of candid shots of Garrett laughing, working on computers, talking animatedly with an older man who had to be Thomas. In the center of the main room, another table, carved from a single piece of oak, polished to a mirror shine. On it, a leather-bound journal and a note in Thomas's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you chose truth over comfort when it mattered most. Garrett told me about your family's dynamics years ago. He also told me about you, how you were the only one who ever questioned Patricia's story. Even as a child, he believed you had the strength to break the cycle. I opened the journal, pages upon pages of family history no one had ever shared. Thomas had documented our family's patterns of dysfunction for decades, tracking how lies and manipulation had been passed down like genetic diseases. Our grandfather, the loving patriarch who told stories and took us on adventures, had actually been an alcoholic who abandoned his first wife and son when Thomas was 3. He reinvented himself completely, married our grandmother, created a new family, and pretended his past never existed. The pattern repeated with our parents' generation. Our father had covered up a hit-and-run accident in college, letting an innocent classmate take the blame, and served 2 years in prison. Our mother had stolen from her employer to pay for our house, then manipulated accounting records to frame a CO worker. Garrett discovered these secrets during his teenage years while helping our father with computer problems. He found hidden files, evidence of both crimes, plus documentation showing how our parents had systematically destroyed innocent lives to protect themselves. Suddenly, everything made sense. Garrett hadn't been the troublemaker because he was bad. He'd been asking uncomfortable questions because he knew our entire family foundation was built on lies and betrayal. Our parents treated him like a threat because he represented the possibility that their carefully constructed facades might collapse. When Patricia lied about the warehouse incident, it gave them the perfect excuse to discredit him completely. It could dismiss anything he said about their past crimes as the ramblings of a dangerous child who couldn't be trusted. Thomas's journal contained copies of legal documents proving every allegation, police reports, court transcripts, medical records, employment files, all meticulously organized and verified. His final entry read, "I was a coward. I had the power to clear innocent names and bring justice to victims. Instead, I chose silence, because confronting the truth would have meant losing the only family I had left, even if it was built on lies." At the bottom, a phone number and an instruction. "Call this number if you're ready to finish what I should have started." I dialed with trembling hands. A woman answered on the first ring. "Miss Thorne, I've been expecting your call. My name is Detective Rodriguez. I worked the case your uncle Thomas contacted us about 15 years ago." She explained that Thomas had approached the police shortly after Garrett's warehouse incident, hoping to provide context for the family dynamics that led to Patricia's lie. But the statute of limitations had expired on both of our parents' crimes. Prosecution was impossible. However, she continued, the victims are still alive. Martin Espinosa, now 63, living in Oregon, had served 2 years for our father's hit and run. Louise Chen, 58, struggling in a nursing home she couldn't afford, had been fired and prosecuted for our mother's embezzlement. Detective Rodriguez gave me their contact info, and Thomas's final request: use Garrett's foundation and my inheritance to provide restitution to those our family wronged. The conversations were the hardest I'd ever endured. Martin Espinosa cried when I called. He'd lost his scholarship, his fiancée, his future, all because of a crime he didn't commit. He'd carried the shame for 40 years. "I always wondered why your father was so kind to me after the trial," he said. "He visited twice, brought books, said he was praying for my rehabilitation. I thought he was a good Christian man trying to help a criminal find redemption." Our father had visited his victim to manage his own guilt, not out of compassion. Louise Chen had lost her career in accounting and never worked in finance again. She'd spent her savings on legal fees, then worked minimum wage jobs for the rest of her life. "Your mother sent me a Christmas card every year for 20 years, she told me. She'd write little notes about how she was praying for my family and hoping I was finding peace. I kept them because I thought someone still believed I was a good person." Our mother had been sending cards to the woman she'd destroyed. Using Thomas's documentation and the foundation's legal team, we provided full restitution. Martin bought a house and secured his retirement. Louise's criminal record was expunged, and she received compensation for lost wages and pension contributions over 4 decades. But the hardest part was yet to come. Thomas had left specific instructions for handling our parents' reactions. They were both still alive. Our father in early-stage dementia. Our mother in an assisted care facility after a stroke. I drove to the care facility with copies of all the evidence. Mom was sitting by the window, staring blankly at the garden. Speech limited, but mind sharp enough to understand. I spread the documents across the table. She recognized her own handwriting on the forged accounting records. Martin, Louise, she whispered, the only words she managed. I explained everything, how Thomas had documented it all, how the victims had suffered for decades, how we were using the foundation to make amends. I told her about the Christmas cards she'd sent to Louise, received by a woman who had no idea why her life had been destroyed. Mom started crying, not gently, but raw, devastating sobs as her entire identity crumbled. When I was finished, she pulled a notebook from her bedside table and wrote a single sentence in her shaking left hand. Tell them I'm sorry. I left the facility and drove straight to Dad's memory care unit. He was in the common room, assembling and disassembling the same jigsaw puzzle for weeks. When I showed him the police report from the hit and run, something flickered in his eyes, clarity piercing through the fog. Martin was a good kid, he said suddenly, voice stronger than it had been in months. He didn't deserve what happened to him. For just a few minutes, my father remembered everything. He told me about the night of the accident, drunk, driving home from a party, hitting Martin's bicycle, panicked, drove away, came back hours later pretending to be a witness. I knew he was innocent, Dad said. I watched them arrest him. I said nothing. I visited him in prison because I thought, if I was kind to him somehow, it would make it less evil. The clarity faded as quickly as it came. He went back to his puzzle, forgetting everything. But I'd gotten what I needed, confirmation that Thomas's evidence was accurate, and acknowledgement that our parents had knowingly destroyed innocent lives. Over the next 6 months, I worked with the Foundation's legal team to contact every person our family had ever wronged. Thomas's journal referenced dozens of smaller incidents. Co-workers fired on false accusations. Classmates bullied into silence. Neighbors ostracized for questioning our version of events. Each conversation felt like surgery on my soul, cutting away pieces of the identity I'd built around being part of a good family. But each also brought healing to people who'd carried undeserved shame for decades. The most surprising call came from Patricia. I found something in Garrett's house, she said, voice barely audible, hidden in his bedroom wall. I think you need to see it. I drove to Garrett's mansion. She was cleaning it out as part of her foundation work. She led me to his bedroom, where she'd discovered a hidden compartment behind the headboard. Inside, a collection of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to family members, never sent. One to me began, I wanted you to know I saw you trying to tell the truth when you were 12. I saw how Mom silenced you. I wanted to tell you I knew you believed me, but I was afraid acknowledging it would put you in the same position I was in, isolated, blamed for things you didn't do. Letters to Dylan were filled with medical advice and emotional support Garrett had researched but never shared. I've been following your physical therapy progress through Mom's Facebook posts. One read, I found some experimental treatments that might help with your chronic pain, but I didn't know how to contact you without causing more family drama. The most devastating were the ones to our parents. I forgive you for choosing to believe Patricia's lie, he'd written to Mom. I understand admitting you were wrong would mean confronting your own capacity for poor judgment. But I need you to know that your choice to believe I was dangerous meant I grew up thinking I actually was. I spent 15 years afraid of my own capacity for violence, because the people who should have known me best told me I was capable of hurting children. To Dad, I know about the hit and run and Mom's embezzlement. Uncle Thomas told me everything when I turned 18. I've spent my entire adult life wondering if I inherited your capacity to destroy innocent lives, or if I could choose to be different. I chose to be different, but that choice cost me my family. The final letter, dated just a week before his death, was addressed to all of us. I'm dying of a heart condition that probably could have been treated earlier if I'd had a family support system encouraging me to seek care. But I was so used to being seen as the family problem that I ignored my symptoms until it was too late. I don't blame you for my death, but I want you to understand that isolation kills just as surely as any disease. I set up the Riddle and the warehouse revelation not to punish you, but to give you a chance to choose truth over comfort. If you're reading this, it means you made the right choice. It means the next generation of our family might actually have a chance to be healthy. The foundation isn't about my legacy, it's about giving falsely accused children the support system I never had, breaking the cycle of lies and manipulation that has defined our family for 4 generations. Thomas has more information. He's been too afraid to share it while alive, but he's left everything to you, my dear niece, because he believes you have the strength to handle the truth. Some stories end, others transform into something better. I love you all, even though I couldn't figure out how to maintain relationships while keeping my integrity. Choose better for your children. Patricia and I cried together in Garrett's empty bedroom, mourning not just his death but the relationship we could have had if our family had chosen truth over convenience decades ago. 2 weeks later, Thomas's lawyer contacted me with a final request. Thomas had purchased property in Montana to establish a retreat center for families dealing with false accusations, scapegoating, and generational trauma. Buildings were already constructed, just needed staff and programming. He He wanted it called the Garrett Thorne Center for Family Truth. The lawyer explained, "He hoped you'd consider running it. I moved to Montana 6 months ago. The center officially opened in January, offering week-long programs for families ready to confront their patterns of dysfunction and deception. We provide therapy, mediation, and legal advocacy for people trying to clear their names or repair damaged relationships." Patricia visits every few months, bringing updates on the foundation and progress reports on the families we've helped. Dylan completed his psychology degree and joined our staff as a trauma counselor. Finn transferred to the University of Montana and helps with our legal advocacy program. Mom died peacefully in her sleep last winter. Her last words to the nursing staff: "Tell Martin and Louise, I'm sorry." We held a small memorial service and donated her remaining savings to the foundation. Dad's dementia has progressed. He no longer recognizes any of us, but the care facility staff says he frequently talks about a boy named Martin and asks if anyone knows whether he's okay. The most recent development came just last month. Detective Rodriguez called with shocking news. "We've had a breakthrough in the Louise Chen case," she said. "Your mother's former employer has agreed to issue a public apology and provide additional compensation. Apparently, your foundation's work has inspired other companies to review old files for cases where employees might have been wrongly terminated." She paused. "There's more. We've identified 17 other cases from the same time period, where the real perpetrator was protected while innocent employees were blamed. Your family's pattern of framing others wasn't unique. It was part of a broader culture of corruption at that company." Louise Chen, now 71, has become a volunteer advocate for our center. She helps other elderly people clearing their names after decades of carrying undeserved shame. Martin Espinosa, now 65, used his restitution money to establish a scholarship fund for formerly incarcerated people rebuilding their lives. He calls it the Second Chance Foundation, and visits our center annually to speak with families about the long-term effects of false accusations. "The hardest part wasn't the prison time," he tells our guests. "It was the 40 years after, always wondering if people could see the criminal record when they looked at me, always feeling like I had to work twice as hard to prove I was worthy of basic human dignity." Both Martin and Louise have said learning the truth, decades later, was more healing than any therapy or compensation we could offer. Last week, I received another mysterious envelope, delivered by hand to the center's front desk. Inside, a photograph of a young girl I didn't recognize, standing in front of a house that looked familiar, but which I couldn't quite place. On the back, Garrett had a daughter. Her name is Emma. She's 22 now, and she's been waiting her entire life to meet her family. She's also been waiting for someone to tell her why her father never contacted her. Below, an address in Portland and a phone number. "I'm driving to Portland tomorrow morning." Some family stories never really end. They just reveal new chapters when you're finally ready to handle the truth. Emma answered the phone on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by it for years. "Is this about my father?" she asked before I could introduce myself. "Yes," I said. "I'm your cousin, and I have a lot to tell you. The cycle of secrets ends with my generation.